She was 19 years old. She had $25 in her pocket, and she was standing in front of a door that had been locked for 114 years. The key was made of iron, heavy, cold. Della Ashford held it in her right hand and it trembled, not because she was afraid, because she hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, because the wind off the Blue Ridge was cutting through her thin canvas jacket, because behind that oak door was everything she had left in the world. She had no family, no savings, no car, no plan, just a canvas rucksack, a cast iron Dutch oven wrapped in a wool blanket, a framed photograph of her grandmother, and the last words the old woman had whispered to her on the morning she died. Della, when you find the second box, do not open it alone. Della had not understood then. She had not understood for 342 days. But standing on that porch, iron key in her hand, she was about to understand everything. Because what nobody knew, not the county clerk, not the neighbors, not even Della herself, was that hidden beneath that inn, sealed inside a wooden box, behind a wall of dressed limestone, in a root cellar that had not been opened in 114 years, was a secret that would rewrite 4 generations of her family and save her life. The bell above the diner door jingled. It was 4:47 in the afternoon. Della Ashford's shift was at 5. She had 13 more minutes. 13 more minutes of standing at the sink in the back kitchen of the Blue Ridge Diner on Magnolia Street in Buena Vista, Virginia. Her hands were red. Her fingers were pruned. The sleeves of her gray sweatshirt were rolled up to her elbows and soaked through anyway. She was scrubbing a stock pot. The pot was crusted with old chili from lunch service, the kind of crust that had baked on and turned brown at the edges, the kind that fought back. Della did not fight back. Della scrubbed, because scrubbing was what she was paid to do. $11 an hour, cash at the end of every shift, no taxes, no paperwork, no questions. Marlene, the owner, had hired her 3 weeks ago without asking to see an ID. Marlene had taken one look at the girl standing in the alley behind the diner with a canvas rucksack and a face that had not been washed in 2 days. And Marlene had said, "You know how to scrub a pot?" Della had said, "Yes, ma'am." Marlene had said, "You know how to keep your mouth shut?" Della had said, "Yes, ma'am." Marlene had said, "Start tomorrow, 6 in the morning." That had been 21 days ago. And every one of those 21 days, Della had shown up at 5:47 in the morning and had scrubbed pots until 5 in the afternoon, and had walked back to Mrs. Grubel's boarding house on Frederick Street, and had paid her $15 a night in cash, and had eaten a slice of white bread with peanut butter for dinner, and had slept. That had been her life, until this morning, until she had come back from her shift and had found the yellow paper taped to the door of the boarding house. Condemned. By order of the Rockbridge County Building Inspector, all residents must vacate premises within 14 days. 14 days. Except it wasn't 14 days. Because Mrs. Grubel had opened the door and had looked at Della with the tired face of a woman who had run a boarding house for 20 years, who had done this speech before. And Mrs. Grubel had said, "Honey, it's 14 days for me. I got somewhere to go. It's tonight for you." Della had said, "Tonight?" Mrs. Grubel had said, "I already rented your room to a girl who paid me a week up front. I'm sorry, I truly am." And then Mrs. Grubel had closed the door. Della had stood on the porch of the boarding house on Frederick Street with her canvas rucksack over her shoulder and her cast iron Dutch oven wrapped in a wool blanket at her feet, and she had counted the money in her pocket, $25, 2 tens and a 5. That had been at 5:38 in the morning. Now it was 4:48 in the afternoon. She had 13 minutes left of her shift, and she had nowhere to sleep. The kitchen door swung open. Marlene came through carrying a bus tub of dirty dishes. "Della?" Della looked up. "Yes, ma'am." Marlene set the tub down. She looked at Della. She looked at the way Della's rucksack was sitting on the floor by the mop bucket instead of hanging in the employee closet. She looked at the wool blanket bundle beside it. Marlene had run diners for 31 years. Marlene knew what a girl looked like when she had slept in her clothes. Marlene sighed. Yeah, you got a place tonight? Della opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Yes, ma'am. Don't lie to me. No, ma'am. Marlene reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out a folded newspaper, the Augusta County Shopper. The free weekly, the kind you picked up at the laundromat or the gas station. I don't know if this helps. Probably doesn't. But I saw something in the back this morning. Estate sales and county surplus. Page 4. She handed the paper to Della. Punch out early, go home. Go wherever. Marlene turned and walked back through the swinging door. Della stood at the sink, water running, stock pot still crusted. She turned off the water. She dried her hands on her apron. She sat down on an overturned milk crate by the back door. She opened the paper to page 4. And that was when she saw it. County surplus, stone building approximately, 1,800 square feet on 1.2 acres, Old Valley Turnpike, 5 miles south of Greenville, Virginia. Built 1847. Former use in, asking $25. Contact Augusta County Clerk. Della read it twice, then a third time, because she was sure she had misread the price. She had not misread the price. $25 for a building. She closed the paper. She looked at the ceiling of the diner kitchen. One of the tiles was missing. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about the old woman who had raised her from the age of 16. When Della's mother, Winifred Ashford, had died of a heart attack in the parking lot of the diner where she waitressed. That had been in the spring of 22. Della had been 16 years old. She had come home from school on a Tuesday afternoon and had found a policeman in the kitchen. Her grandmother had come the next morning. Grandma Mabel, 80 years old and sharp as a paring knife. She had taken Della back to the boarding house on Route 11 outside Greenville, and she had said, "You will live with me now, because that is what family does." Della had lived with Grandma Mabel for 2 years. 2 years of the smell of wood smoke and cornbread. 2 years of learning what she had already known but had forgotten. 2 years of standing at a stone hearth and reading the color of the coals. Then Grandma Mabel had died, in a rocking chair beside that hearth, holding a cast iron ladle. In November of 24, she had been A81, Della had been 18. She had left the boarding house with the Dutch oven and the framed photograph and a name in her head. Cornelius Ashford, the great-great-great-grandfather who had built an inn on the Old Valley Turnpike in 1847. Her grandmother had said, "Della, that building is still standing. I've seen it. I've stood on the porch and looked through the window. The hearth is still there. It's the biggest hearth in Augusta County." Della had been 11 when her grandmother had told her that. She had said, "Grandma, why don't we buy it?" Her grandmother had smiled, sad, slow. "Some things aren't for me, honey. Some things are for the person who comes after." Della had not understood then. She thought she understood now. She stood up from the milk crate. She finished the stock pot. At 500 exactly, she punched out. Marlene handed her $55 in cash. Della's daily wage plus a $20 tip. "That's from me, don't argue." Della did not argue. She picked up her rucksack. She picked up the Dutch oven. She walked out the back door of the diner and into the cold March wind. She had $80 now, a name in her head, and 13 miles to walk before dark. She started walking. A woman in a red pickup truck picked her up 8 miles in. A woman named Lorraine who was driving to Stewart's Draft to pick up her granddaughter from cheerleading practice. Lorraine did not ask questions. Lorraine had raised 3 girls and had seen enough tired faces to know that some faces did not want questions. Lorraine dropped Della off at Beverly Street and Central Avenue in Staunton at 6:52 in the evening. The Augusta County Clerk's office closed at 5. Della slept on a bench in the courthouse courtyard. She wrapped the wool blanket around her shoulders. She used the rucksack as a pillow. She held the Dutch oven against her chest. She did not sleep well, but she did not cry. She had not cried since her grandmother's funeral, and she was not going to start tonight. At 7:58 in the morning, Della walked up the granite steps of the Augusta County Clerk's office. The door was still locked. She waited. At 8:00, exactly, the door opened. An older man in a brown cardigan looked out. Late 60s, gray mustache, wire-rimmed glasses that had slid halfway down his nose. He looked at Della. He looked at her rucksack. He looked at the wool blanket bundle. He looked at her face. "You look like somebody I used to know." Della said, "Excuse me?" "Come in out of the cold, honey. It's colder than a well-digger's belt buckle out there." She followed him in. His office was small, 2 desks, a filing cabinet, a ceramic mug on the desk that said, "World's Okayest Grandpa." He gestured to a chair. "Sit down. My name is Elwood Pendleton. I'm the county clerk. What can I do for you this morning?" Della, she pulled the newspaper out. She opened it to page 4. She pointed at the listing. "I want to buy that." Mr. Pendleton looked at the newspaper, then at Della, then at the newspaper again. Then he took off his wire-rimmed glasses. He wiped them with a handkerchief. He put them back on. "Honey," he said, slow. "What's your name?" "Della." "Della Ashford." The old man went very still. He set the handkerchief down. "Ashford." "Yes, sir." "Are you Winifred Ashford's girl?" Della's breath caught. She had not heard her mother's name spoken by a stranger in 3 years. "Yes, sir." "And your grandmother? Was that Mabel Ashford?" "Mabel, who ran the boarding house on Route 11 outside Greenville." Della could not speak. She nodded. Mr. Pendleton took his glasses off again. He rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "Sweet Jesus," he said. "Sweet Jesus in a straw hat. Do you know what you're asking to buy a stone building on the Old Valley Turnpike for $25? No, honey." He stood up. He walked over to the filing cabinet. He pulled open the bottom drawer. He pulled out a manila envelope that had been sitting in that drawer for so long, the corners had gone soft. He came back to his desk. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of yellowed paper and a large iron key on a loop of frayed hemp cord. Mr. Pendleton slid the paper across the desk. "That's the deed to the Ashford Inn, built in 1847 by your great-great-great-grandfather, a man named Cornelius Ashford. Closed in 1911 by his grandson, a man named Ebenezer Ashford, and it has been sitting empty ever since." Della stared at the paper, the name at the top, in flowing 19th century script. "Cornelius Ashford." Her hands began to shake. Mr. Pendleton leaned back. "Your grandmother came to see me 3 times. First time was 1978. She was 35 years old. She had $200 saved up. But the state had the property tied up in some historical registry mess. Second time was 1994. She had $800, but the price had gone up. County wanted $5,000. She couldn't manage it. Third time was 2019. She was 76 years old. She sat right where you're sitting, and she said, "Elwood, my granddaughter is going to come here someday. She's going to be young. She's going to be tired. She's going to have nothing. And when she comes, you give her the inn. You give it to her for whatever she can pay. Because that girl is the one. That girl is the one who's going to keep the promise." Della could not breathe. She said that, honey, word for word." He pulled a small notebook from his desk drawer. He flipped it open. He turned it around so Della could read it. The handwriting was neat. Blue ink. Dated October 14, 2019. Mabel Ashford. "Today. Said her granddaughter will come. Told me to give her the inn. Whatever she can pay. She is the one who will keep the promise." Della put her hand over her mouth. She did not cry. Mr. Pendleton pushed the deed and the iron key across the desk. $25, honey, that's what your grandmother said. Because that's what she had in her pocket the first time she stood in front of that building. In 1962, she was 19 years old, same age as you. Della reached into her pocket. She pulled out 2 tens and a 5. She set them on the desk with the care she would have used for a bird's egg. Mr. Pendleton looked at the money. He did not touch it. "There's one more thing," he said. He reached into the manila envelope. He pulled out a second sheet, newer, typed, notarized, signed at the bottom in a shaky hand, Mabel Ashford, September 3, 2023, 14 months before her grandmother had died. He handed the paper to Della. Della held it in her lap. She could not read it yet. Her hands were shaking too hard. Mr. Pendleton stood up. He walked to the window. He gave her privacy. Della looked down at the paper. "My dear Della, if you are reading this, it means you found your way to Elwood. Give him my thanks. I never told you this, because I did not want you to feel that your life was planned for you. Your life is your own. You can walk away from this inn. You can sell it. You can burn it down. That is your right. But if you do not walk away, there is something you need to know inside the Dutch oven I left you. Under the false bottom, there is a letter from me and a small brass key. Do not open the letter until you are standing inside the inn. The brass key opens something in the root cellar. Do not open it alone. Wait until you are ready. You will know I love you. I have loved you every day since the morning you were born, and I will love you every day after I am gone. Feed whoever comes. Grandma Mabel." Della folded the letter. Very carefully, she put it in her pocket. She looked up. Mr. Pendleton was still at the window. "Mr. Pendleton." "Yes, honey." "I need a ride." He turned. He smiled. Slow, said kind. "I know you do." Mr. Pendleton drove a 2009 Ford F-150. Blue. Faded. They drove south on Route 11. Past the fields still brown from winter. Past the barns with peeling red paint. Past a farmer walking a fence line. After 20 minutes, Mr. Pendleton turned right onto a smaller road. A wooden sign at the corner said, "Old Valley Turnpike, 3 more miles." Then he slowed the truck. "There it is, honey." Della looked. The inn stood on a low rise above the road, just as her grandmother had described it. A 2-story limestone building, standing seam tin roof, a wide front porch with 2 stone columns, a massive central chimney rising from the peak. The windows were dark, the shutters closed, but the walls were straight, the roof was intact, it was still standing after 114 years. Mr. Pendleton pulled the truck to a stop. "I'm going to leave you here. This is your moment, not mine." "Yes, sir." She climbed out. She lifted her rucksack from the bed. She lifted the Dutch oven still wrapped in the horse blanket. She held it against her chest. Mr. Pendleton rolled down the window. "Della, your grandmother told me one more thing. She said, tell her the fire has been waiting for her since she was 5 years old. The fire has been waiting." Della's throat closed. Mr. Pendleton nodded. He drove away down the Old Valley Turnpike. Della walked up the drive, 200 yards. Weeds through the gravel. A rabbit crossed her path. She reached the porch steps. 3 stone steps, worn smooth in the middle, cut by the boots of 114 years of travelers. She climbed them. She set the rucksack down. She set the Dutch oven down. She pulled the iron key from her pocket. The key was heavy. The bit was cut in a shape she had never seen. She put the key in the lock. She turned. It turned. Just like that, after 114 years, it turned. She pushed the door open. The smell that came out was the smell of stone and old wood and cold ash. She stepped inside. The floor was chestnut, wide planks, 12 inches across. The kind of chestnut you cannot buy anymore because the blight had killed all the trees 100 years ago. The room was large, 30 feet long, 20 feet wide. Heavy timber beams running across the ceiling. There were no chairs, no tables, no furniture at all. But against the back wall, there it was. The hearth, 6 feet wide, 4 feet tall, limestone the color of cream and rust, blackened at the throat by 114 years of cooking fires. The iron crane still mounted in the left wall. 6 hooks, still swinging free when Della touched it with the tip of one finger. The spit jack in the right wall, brass gears green with age, but the mechanism intact. The hearthstone worn smooth, cupped in the middle where 1,000 pots had been set down and picked up. Della walked toward it, slow, one step, then another. She stopped 6 feet away. She set the Dutch oven down. She unwrapped the horse blanket. The Dutch oven was 12 inches across, cast iron, seasoned black. She had cooked in this pot her whole life. She knew this pot better than she knew her own hands. And the bottom was sitting a 1/4 inch too high, a false bottom. She pressed on it. It shifted. She pressed harder. It came loose. Underneath, a folded piece of paper and a small brass key, 2 inches long, bright and unblemished. She picked up the paper. She unfolded it. My dear Della, you are standing inside the inn now. I can feel it. This fire has been cold for 114 years. It is time to light it again, but not today. Today you are tired. Today you are hungry. Today you have walked a long way. Tomorrow, walk to Greenville. Go to the feed store on Main Street. Ask for Hattie Coleman. Tell her you are Mabel Ashford's granddaughter. She will know what to do. The brass key opens something in the root cellar. The stairs are to the right of the hearth, but do not go down there tonight. Do not go down there until you are ready. Feed whoever comes. Grandma. Della folded the letter. She looked at the brass key in her palm. She looked at the narrow stone staircase to the right of the hearth. It descended into darkness. She did not go down. She put the brass key in her pocket, next to the letter, next to the $80 she had left. She sat down on the floor, her back to the hearthstone. The stone was cold, but it was hers. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 342 days, Della Ashford felt her grandmother's hand on her shoulder. She slept. Della woke at dawn. The floor was cold. Her hip ached. Her breath came out in a thin white cloud. But she was warm inside, in a way she had not been warm in a long time. She stood up. She folded the blanket. She walked over to the front door and opened it. The sun was just coming over the ridge to the east. The valley below was full of blue shadow. A single crow was flying low across a fallow field. She stepped out onto the porch. Cold air. Sharp. Clean. She took a breath, then another. $80 in her pocket. A brass key she was not allowed to use yet. A name in her head. Hattie Coleman. She started walking. Coleman's Feed and Seed had been on Main Street in Greenville for 83 years. The sign was hand-painted, green letters on whiteboard. The paint had peeled at the edges. Della pushed the door open. A bell jingled overhead. The store smelled like grain and molasses and old wood. Bags of chicken feed stacked to the ceiling. A cast-iron wood stove in the middle of the floor. A wooden counter along the back wall. Behind the counter, a woman, late 70s. Silver hair pulled back in a bun. A red cardigan over a blue house dress. Reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked up when Della came in. Her face went still, not shocked, not surprised, just still. The way a person's face goes still when they have been waiting for something for a long time, and it has finally arrived. Well, Della walked to the counter. Are you Mrs. Coleman? I am. My name is Della Ashford. My grandmother was Mabel Ashford. I know who you are, honey. I knew before you walked in the door. Mrs. Coleman took off her glasses. Mabel wrote me a letter 3 years ago. She said you'd be coming. She said you'd walk into my store some morning in the spring, and I'd know you because you'd look just like her at 19. And you do, honey, you do. Della's throat tightened. She wrote about me. She wrote about you for 40 years, honey. Every letter she sent me since 1985. Mrs. Coleman came around the counter. She was shorter than Della had expected. She had to reach up to put her hands on Della's shoulders. Now, let me look at you. She looked for a long moment. Her eyes moved across Della's face like a woman reading a letter she had been waiting to read. Then she nodded once. All right, honey, let's get you fed. She led Della to the back of the store. There was a small kitchen, a wood stove, a cast iron skillet, a percolator already going. She sat Della down. She poured coffee into a chip-out mug. She cracked 4 eggs into the skillet. She fried them in butter. She put them on a plate with 2 thick slices of buttered bread. She set the plate in front of Della. Eat, honey. Della ate. She had not tasted eggs cooked in butter since her grandmother had died. She had not sat at a table where somebody had made her a plate. She ate slowly. She did not want it to end. Mrs. Coleman sat across from her. She did not talk. When the plate was clean, Mrs. Coleman poured more coffee. Now, honey, tell me what you need, Della told her. Not everything, not about the brass key, not about the root cellar. Those were still her grandmother's secrets. But she told her about the inn, about Mr. Pendleton, about sleeping on the floor by the hearth. Mrs. Coleman listened. When Della was done, she took a long, slow breath. All right, here's what we're going to do. First, you need cornmeal, and you need lard, and you need salt and eggs and coffee and beans. Second, you need a helper because that inn has been sitting empty since 1911, and there is more work in that building than one person can do. I don't have money for a helper. You don't need money, honey. You need Tobias Rutledge, who Mrs. Coleman was already writing on a scrap of paper. Tobias Rutledge, 22 years old, lives above the hardware store on Lee Street. His grandfather was Dutch Rutledge, best carpenter in Augusta County for 50 years. Tobias has hands like his grandfather. He's got no work right now. He lost his mama last winter to the cancer. She handed the paper to Della. You tell him Hattie Coleman sent you. You tell him you need a carpenter. You tell him you can pay in food and in a place to work and in the chance to do something that matters. Della took the paper. He won't say yes. He will, honey. Why, Bao? Because I already talked to him. Della stared at her. Mabel told me to. 3 years ago, she said, Hattie, when my Della comes, send her to Tobias Rutledge. That boy needs her as much as she needs him. Della did not know what to say, so she said nothing. Mrs. Coleman packed a box. Cornmeal, lard, salt, coffee, beans, eggs wrapped in newspaper, a block of yellow cheese, matches, kindling, a paring knife, a butcher knife, a whetstone. She refused to let Della pay. You'll pay me back, honey, when you feed the first traveler who walks through your door. Tobias Rutledge answered the door on the third knock. He was tall, 6'2", thin, dark hair that needed cutting. A 3-day beard, eyes the color of wet slate. He looked at Della. You're the Ashford girl. How did you know? Hattie said you'd come today. He looked at the box. You came from Hattie's. Yes. Then I already know why you're here. He stepped aside. Come in, set that box down, then we'll go. She stepped in. His apartment was one room, a cot in one corner, a workbench along one wall. Tools hung on pegboard. She set the box down. Mrs. Coleman said you're a carpenter. I try. I can't pay you much. I have $80. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? He was pulling on a canvas jacket. He stopped. He looked at her. I want to build something that lasts more than a season, ma'am. That's all. He walked out the door. She followed him. Tobias walked into the common room of the Ashford Inn. He stopped in the middle of the floor. He looked at the hearth. He did not speak for a long time. Then he said, I have never seen anything like this in my life, Della said. I know. He walked over. He put his hand on the limestone. He ran his fingers along the mortar joints. He crouched. He looked up the chimney. He stood up. The stone is sound. The mortar needs pointing in 3 places. The crane needs oil. The spitjack needs a full teardown. But the bones are good. How long? To make it usable, a week. To make it beautiful, a year. I have a week. Then we start today. They started. Della cleaned. She swept the chestnut floor. She wiped down the windowsills. She scrubbed the hearthstone with sand and water until the limestone came clean. Tobias climbed a ladder to the roof. He cleared the chimney cap. A family of squirrels had built a nest inside it. He carried the nest down and set it in the woods. He worked a chimney brush down the flue. Creosote and soot and old bird bones fell into the hearth in thick black clumps. They did not speak much. They did not need to. By the end of the third day, the chimney drew properly. On the fourth day, Della built her first fire, not in the small fireplace, in the cooking hearth. She raked a bed of hickory splits into a teepee, a single match. The kindling caught. The hickory caught. Smoke rose up the flue, straight and thin. The fire burned clean. Della sat back on her heels. She watched the flames climb. Tobias came in. He was carrying a small oak table. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at the fire. That fire is drawing right. Yes. You know what you're doing. My grandmother taught me. He set the table down. He sat on the hearthstone across from her. Are you hungry? I'm always hungry. Then I'll cook. She banked the coals. She mixed cornmeal and eggs and buttermilk and a pinch of salt. She poured it into the greased Dutch oven. She set it in the ashes. She raked hot coals onto the lid. She sat back. She waited. The smell filled the room. The smell of cornbread baking over hardwood coals in a stone hearth. The smell that had been absent from this hearth for 114 years. Tobias closed his eyes. He did not open them for a long time. When he did, he said, My grandmother used to bake cornbread. She died when I was 11. I have not smelled it cook like this since, Della said. I'm sorry about your grandmother, he said. I'm sorry about yours. The cornbread came out golden on top, brown on the bottom. She cut 2 pieces. She handed him one. He ate it slowly. When he was done, he said, Della. It was the first time he had used her name. She looked up. He said, Your grandmother trained you for something. She said, I know, he said. I am glad to be here when you figure out what. Word got out. It always did in the Shenandoah Valley. By the end of the second week, Mrs. Coleman was driving out every Sunday afternoon with a fresh sack of cornmeal. By the end of the third week, a retired school teacher named Judith Vernell was bringing dishes she had inherited from her mother. By the end of the fourth week, a mechanic named Roy Turnbull had shown up with a rebuilt battery for Tobias's truck and had not accepted payment. By the end of the fifth week, people had started coming to eat. A truck driver named Merle, who had stopped at Grandma Mabel's boarding house every Wednesday in the 90s. A pastor from Stewart's Draft. A young couple from Charlottesville who had stopped because the sign at the end of the drive said community table. Whoever comes, whatever you can pay. Della fed them all. Pinto beans slow simmered on the crane. Cornbread from the Dutch oven. Coffee from a percolator on the hearthstone. She did not charge. She had a wooden bowl on the mantel. Pay what you can or nothing at all. Some people put nothing. Most people put something. A few put more than they should have. By the end of the 10th week, she had almost $3,000 in a coffee can under her cot. This is enough. She was wrong. On a Thursday morning in the middle of May, a black Lincoln sedan pulled up the drive. The Lincoln was new, the tires unmarked. The driver stayed in the car. A man got out of the back seat. 50s, silver hair, a charcoal suit, a silk tie the color of dried blood. He carried a leather portfolio. He walked up the porch steps like a man who had never been told he could not go somewhere. Della was setting a pot of beans on the trivet. The man rapped on the open door. Miss Ashford. She turned. She did not know him. But she knew what he was. The way you know a copperhead the second you see it in the grass. Yes. My name is Preston Vance. I represent Vance Holdings out of Richmond. May I come in? You're already in, he smiled. It did not reach his eyes. Charming. May I sit? No. All right. He stood in the middle of her common room. He looked around like a man doing an appraisal. This is a remarkable property, Miss Ashford. Yes, I have been authorized to make you an offer. No, he blinked. You have not heard the offer. I do not need to. He smiled again. Same non-smile. $800,000. Cash. Closing in 30 days. You could go anywhere, buy anything. Never scrub a pot again. Della set the ladle down. She looked at him. Mr. Vance, this inn was built by my great-great-great-grandfather in 1847. It is not for sale. Miss Ashford, everything is for sale. Not this. His smile was gone now. He opened the portfolio. He pulled out a document. Miss Ashford, this property does not currently meet Augusta County Code for a commercial food service. It does not have a certified septic system. It does not have a licensed commercial kitchen. It does not have 12 required permits. He set the document on the table. I have friends on the County Board of Supervisors, old friends, and they are very concerned about a young woman with no training operating an unlicensed food establishment on a historic property in violation of at least 14 county ordinances. He tapped the document. This is a courtesy $800,000 or a very long summer of code inspections. Della did not look at the document. She looked at him. Get out of my inn. He picked up the portfolio. He walked to the door. He turned in the doorway. Miss Ashford, my family has wanted this land for a very long time, longer than you know. Do not make my grandfather's mistake of underestimating an Ashford. He walked out. The Lincoln drove away. Della's hands were shaking. Tobias came in from the back. What did he want? Everything. That night, Della could not sleep. She lay on her cot. She listened to the wind. She thought about what Preston Vance had said. Longer than you know. She got up. She lit a lamp. She walked to the mantel. She opened the guest ledger. Names, dates, origins, destinations, thousands of them. She stopped on a page in 1849. She did not know why. Down at the bottom, in a different handwriting, in pencil, Vance, west of the ridge, offered $3,000 for the inn in the fields, told him no. She turned the page. Vance came again with two men, told me I would regret refusing, told him I have already regretted things. That would not be one of them. Vance's son, Vance's grandson in a Union uniform. A letter from Richmond, returned unopened. Della closed the ledger. Her heart was pounding. She walked to the door. She stepped out onto the porch. She looked down at the old Valley Turnpike under the moon. 178 years, 178 years of Vance men wanting this land, and 178 years of Ashford men and women saying no. She was the next one. She was going to say no too. The next morning, another car came up the drive. Not a Lincoln. An older Toyota Corolla, gray. A dent in the passenger fender. A man got out, mid-40s, blue jeans, a worn Carhartt jacket, a face that looked like he had not slept in 3 days. He walked up the porch steps. He knocked. Della was at the hearth. She turned. My name is Marlon Ashford. She stopped moving. I'm your cousin, and I own half of this inn. He said it quietly, almost apologetically, like a man delivering news he did not want to deliver. He pulled a folded document from his jacket. He set it on the table. I don't want to fight Della. My lawyer says I have to. My great-grandfather was Ephraim Ashford, Ebenezer's younger brother. Left the family in 1902, went to West Virginia, died in a mine collapse in 1914, left one son. That son had a son. That son had me. How did you find me? A man named Preston Vance found me 2 weeks ago in Wheeling. Della's stomach turned. He is paying my lawyer, Della. I am not going to lie to you about that. He is paying my lawyer to prove I own half of this inn, and then he is going to buy my half for $150,000. Why are you telling me this? Marlon Ashford looked at her. He looked at the hearth. He looked at the guest ledger. Because I lost my job in November. Because my wife left me in December. Because I have $12,000 of medical debt from my mother's last year. Because $150,000 is more money than I have ever had at one time in my life. And because when Preston Vance sat across from me in a Denny's in Wheeling and explained what he was going to do to a 19-year-old girl he had never met, I told him yes, because I needed the money. And I have not slept a full night since I said yes. Della looked at him. He looked older than 45. He looked like a man who had walked a long way to get to her porch. Are you hungry? He looked up. I'm about to bake cornbread. Sit down. Della, did you hear what I just said? I am the one suing you. I heard what you said. Sit down. He sat. She banked the coals. She mixed the batter. She set the Dutch oven in the ashes. She sat across from him. They did not speak while the cornbread baked. When it was done, she cut two pieces. She set one in front of him. He held it. It smells like my grandmother's. That's because it is. He ate. When he was done, he wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his jacket. Della, I am going to lose in court. I know that. Vance's lawyer is going to lose because you're going to fight us, and I hope you win. But I signed papers, and I cannot afford to fight them now. He stood up. He walked to the door. He turned. There is one thing you should know. He reached into his jacket. He pulled out an envelope. My grandmother, Ephraim's granddaughter, she kept things. When she died last year, I got her trunk. In the trunk was a diary, Cornelius Ashford's diary, from 1847 to 1870. My family has had it for 110 years, and nobody has ever read it. It should be here. I brought it because I could not sleep last night either. He walked out. The Toyota drove away. Della picked up the envelope. Inside was a small leather-bound book. The cover was cracked. The pages yellowed. She sat down. She opened it. She read for 6 hours. Cornelius Ashford had been a careful man. He had written down everything. And on a page dated August 14th, 1849, he had written about a man named Josiah Vance. Mr. Josiah Vance of Nelson County came today with a proposal. He wishes to purchase this inn and the surrounding fields for $3,000. I told him no. He asked why. I told him that my father gave me the fields and I built the inn with my own hands and that some things are not for sale. He left angry. More entries. More Vance visits. Then in October 1849. 2-day Vance came with a lawyer. The man carried a document. The document would have sold me my own land for $1. Vance stood in the doorway. He said, Mr. Ashford, you will be sorry for this, I said. Mr. Vance, that may be, but I will be able to look my children if I faced. Della turned pages, more entries, Vance appearing, then his son, then his grandson, then, in 1868, a very short entry, in pencil, almost as if Cornelius had not wanted to write it in ink. Vance's daughter married into the Ashford line this past winter. Not my line, Ebenezer's brother's line, the one that will move to West Virginia. She brought the Vance covetousness with her. I have warned Ephraim. He did not listen. Della froze. She read the sentence again. Vance's daughter married into the Ashford line. Ebenezer's brother's line. Marlin Ashford's line. She closed the diary. Marlin Ashford was not just her cousin. Marlin's great-great-grandmother was a Vance. Preston Vance was not just paying Marlin's lawyer. Preston Vance was Marlin's distant cousin. They were the same family. They had been the same family for 157 years. She stood up. She walked to the narrow stone staircase to the right of the hearth. She lit a candle. She started down the stairs. The root cellar smelled like earth and stone. The walls were dressed limestone. The floor packed dirt. She held the candle up. In the center of the room, on a stone shelf, a wooden box with iron corner brackets. She walked to the shelf. She lifted the lid. Inside, a leather tool roll, a heavy canvas pouch, a thick leather-bound ledger. She lifted the pouch. She loosened the drawstring. Coins, gold coins, She poured a handful into her palm. Liberty Quarter Eagles, dated 1847, 1858, 1871, 1889, 1902, 1910. She counted 40 coins. She lifted the ledger. She opened to the last page. M.R. James Doyle, Richmond to Lexington. Traveling by motor car, the last guest. God keep the road, below the last entry, tucked into the back cover. A folded letter. To whoever find this cellar, my name is Ebenezer Ashford, grandson of Cornelius. Today is the 16th of March, 1912. I am closing this house. I am leaving the tools and my savings in the guest ledger in this cellar. The cellar is the driest and coolest room. Feed the next traveler who comes through the door. Ebenezer Ashford, innkeeper. Della looked at the brass key in her hand. The brass key was too small for the box she had just opened. Her grandmother's letter had said, the brass key opens something in the root cellar. Not this box. Something else. She held the candle up higher. She thought about Cornelius's diary, about a margin note she had almost missed. I have hidden the papers behind the 7 stone from the left in the 5th course of the west wall, where my father taught me to hide things that matter. Della turned to the west wall. She counted courses from the floor up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She counted stones from the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 7th stone, she pressed her palm against it. It shifted, just slightly, just enough. Della's heart was pounding. She put both hands on the stone. She pulled. The stone slid out. Behind it, a hollow, 6 inches deep. Inside the hollow, a second wooden box, smaller, bound in iron, fitted with a brass lock. She lifted it out. She set it on the shelf. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out her grandmother's brass key. She slid it into the lock. She turned. The lock clicked. Della held her breath. She lifted the lid. Inside the smaller box, on top, a single sheet of paper, folded once, in her grandmother's handwriting. My darling Della, if you are reading this, you have found the second box. You have read Cornelius's diary. You know about the Vances. What I did not tell you is that I almost lost to them in 1998. A man named Harold Vance came to me. He offered me $200,000 for the inn, which I did not own at the time. He offered the money if I would sign a paper saying I did not intend to purchase it. I did not sign. I spent 6 months at the courthouse in Staunton, and I found something. I found the original deed from 1847, signed by Cornelius, filed by his own hand. The deed is not for 1.2 acres. The deed is for 12 acres. Somebody changed the county records. In 1913, a clerk was paid to alter the deed to shrink the property. The Vances quietly bought up the other 10.8 acres. I found the original deed. It is in this box. I could not afford to fight them. In 1998, I did not have a lawyer good enough, but you do none. Oh, because I left you the gold. Take the original deed. Take the coins. Go to a lawyer in Charlottesville named Margaret Compton. She has been waiting for you for 27 years. Fight them, win, and feed whoever comes. I love you. Grandma Mabel. Della's hands were shaking. She lifted the next sheet from the box. Thicker, older, cream-colored, deed of property, Augusta County, Virginia. Cornelius Ashford, grantor. Below, the description. 12 acres, bounded on the north by the Stone Bridge, on the south by the Oak Grove, on the east by the Ridge Line, on the west by the Turnpike. Signed, sealed, dated April 2nd, 1847. Della sat down on the floor of the cellar. She held the deed in her lap. She did not cry. The next morning she drove to Charlottesville. Tobias drove her in the Chevy S10. She had the deed in a leather portfolio, the gold coins in a canvas bag under her seat. Margaret Compton's office was on West Main Street, in a brick townhouse. The receptionist was a young woman with dark hair. She looked up when Della came in. Can I help you? My name is Della Ashford. I don't have an appointment, but I think Ms. Compton has been waiting for me. The receptionist did not ask her to explain. She stood up. She walked to a closed office door. She knocked. She went in. She came out a moment later. Miss Compton will see you now. Margaret Compton was 71 years old, silver hair cut short, a green wool cardigan, reading glasses on a chain. She stood up when Della walked in. She looked at Della for a long moment. Sweet Lord, you have her eyes. My grandmother said you would be waiting. Margaret Compton sat down. She opened a desk drawer. She pulled out a file. Thick. The label on the tab said Ashford Mabel, 1998, do not discard. I met your grandmother in April of 1998. She sat in that chair. She told me she was going to lose her fight. She could not afford to keep going. But she said she would come back someday, or she would send someone. And when that person arrived, I was to open this file and finish what she started. I have not opened this file in 27 years. I have been paying to keep it here. Della reached into the leather portfolio. She set it on the desk. Margaret Compton opened it. She looked at the deed. She did not speak for a long time. Then she looked up. Miss Ashford, this is the largest quiet title action I have ever seen in my career. This is not just about your inn. This is about 10.8 acres of land that a Richmond development firm has been holding since 1937 under a chain of title that begins with a fraudulent recording in 1913. This is going to be the last case of my career, and it is going to be the one I am proudest of. How can you afford me? Della lifted the canvas bag from the floor. She set it on the desk. Margaret Compton opened it. She looked inside. She looked up. She did not smile. Not exactly. But something moved behind her eyes. Miss Ashford, I think we are going to be just fine. The lawsuit was filed on the first Monday in June. Preston Vance received notice on Wednesday morning. Della did not see him again for 4 months. But she felt him, the way you feel a storm rolling in over the ridge. The county building inspector came out the second week of June. He wrote down 17 code violations. He handed Della a citation, 90 days to bring the property into compliance. He drove away. Tobias came and stood beside her. How bad? Fixable, but it will cost money. How much? 40,000. We have the coins. We have the coins, but Margaret Compton is going to eat half of them before this is over. Then we work harder. They worked harder. She kept cooking. The wooden bowl on the mantel kept filling and emptying. A food writer from Southern Living came to eat. She wrote a piece in the September issue. She called Della the inheritor of a 200-year-old tradition. By the end of September, Della was cooking for 40 people a night, 6 nights a week. Tobias had built long communal tables from oak he had salvaged from a torn-down tobacco barn. The trial was set for the 3rd week of October. The night before the trial, Della sat on the porch of the inn. The sun was setting behind the ridge. A single truck was climbing the drive. Tobias, he parked. He got out. He walked up the porch steps. He sat down 2 feet below her. He did not speak for a long time. Then he said, Della, whatever happens tomorrow, I am glad I got to build this table with you. Tobias, that is all I am going to say. She reached down. She took his hand. He held hers back. They sat that way until the sun was gone. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled. A judge who had been on the bench for 28 years and who did not suffer fools. Preston Vance sat at the defense table with 3 lawyers. Della sat at the plaintiff's table in a blue dress Mrs. Coleman had given her. With Margaret Compton. Margaret Compton stood up. Your Honor, this case is about a piece of paper, a deed, filed in this county on April 2nd, 1847, by a man named Cornelius Ashford. The deed described a property of 12 acres. In 1913, that deed was altered by a county clerk who was later dismissed for cause. The property was reduced on paper to 1.2 acres. The remaining 10.8 acres were subsequently purchased by shell companies, all owned by a family named Vance. We have the original deed. We have the forensic report from a paper conservator. We have the diary of Cornelius Ashford. She paused. She looked toward the back of the courtroom. And we have an eyewitness. Every head in the courtroom turned. An elderly woman stood up in the back row. Small, bent slightly at the shoulders, white hair pulled back, a brown wool coat. She walked to the front with a wooden cane. Slow, steady, unafraid. She was 82 years old. Her name was Adelaide Whitmore. Della had never seen her before. Adelaide Whitmore was sworn in. She sat in the witness chair. Margaret Compton said, "Mrs. Whitmore, please state your name and your relationship to this case." Adelaide Whitmore leaned toward the microphone. Her voice was thin, but it was clear. "My name is Adelaide Whitmore. I was born in this county in 1943. My mother was Cordelia Bellamy. She was the housekeeper at the Ashford Inn from 1898 until it closed in 1911. My mother was 17 years old when Ebenezer Ashford closed the doors. She stayed on for 2 more months to help him inventory the property. She was the last person to work at the inn. When my mother died in 1971, she left me a trunk. In the trunk was an album of photographs, some of them taken at the inn. She reached into a canvas bag. She pulled out an album, green leather. She opened it to a page marked with a ribbon. This photograph was taken on the front porch of the Ashford Inn in June of 1899. My mother is the young woman on the left. The man on the right is Cornelius Ashford. She turned the album around. Then she pulled out a second photograph, larger, sepia, framed in cardboard. This photograph was taken in 1901. On the porch of the inn, it shows Cornelius Ashford handing a hand-drawn map to my grandfather, Ezekiel Bellamy. The map shows the 12 acres of the Ashford property. She held up the photograph. On the back of this photograph, Cornelius Ashford wrote in his own hand. She turned the photograph over. She read, "This land belongs to the Ashford family forever. Anyone who says otherwise is a liar." She looked up. "My mother gave me this photograph when I was 10 years old," she said. "Adelaide, someday there will be a girl and she will come. And when she comes, you give this to her because it is not ours to keep." I have kept this photograph for 72 years. She looked at Della. "It is not mine anymore." She held the photograph out. Della stood up. She walked to the witness stand. She took the photograph in both hands. Adelaide Whitmore said, "Feed the traveler honey. That is what my mother said too." Della could not speak. She nodded. She sat back down. The judge looked at Preston Vance. "Mr. Vance, do your attorneys have any response?" Preston Vance's lead attorney stood up. He opened his mouth. He closed it. "Your Honor, may we request a recess?" "No, sir, you may not." The judge looked at his notes. He looked at Preston Vance. He looked at Della. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The 1913 recording is voided. The 1847 deed is restored. The property known as the Ashford Inn, including 12 acres of adjoining land, is hereby confirmed as the sole property of Miss Della Ashford. Court is adjourned." He struck the gavel. Preston Vance did not look at Della. He stood up. He walked out of the courtroom. Della never saw him again. 2 nights later, it was raining, a slow, steady October rain. There was a knock on the door. Della opened it. Marlon Ashford was standing on the porch. He was soaked through, his Carhartt jacket, his jeans, his hair flat against his forehead. He did not have a portfolio. He did not have papers. "Della, I do not want anything. I do not want money. I do not want the property. I do not want to sue you. I dropped the case yesterday. My lawyer says I have to pay him. I do not have the money. I will figure it out. I came to say I am sorry." She looked at him. He was shivering. "Marlon, come inside." "Della, you do not owe me kindness." "I am not offering it because I owe it. I am offering it because you are cold. Come inside." He came inside. She wrapped him in the wool blanket. She sat him by the fire. She heated coffee on the hearthstone. She mixed cornbread batter. She set the Dutch oven in the ashes. She sat across from him. The Vances have been coming for this land since 1849. Cornelius wrote about them in his diary. I know. In 1868, a Vance woman married an Ashford man, Ephraim, your great-great-grandfather. He looked up. I did not know that. Marlin, you are half Ashford and half Vance. He was quiet for a long time. I have always felt like two people fighting inside me. That does not have to keep going. You can be the one who stops it. The cornbread was done. She cut two pieces. She set one in front of him. He held it. He looked at her. Della, I read that diary too, before I brought it to you. And Cornelius wrote something on the very last page that I did not tell you about. He wrote, my greatest wish is not that my line prospers. My greatest wish is that my line remembers, because a family that remembers can forgive, and a family that forgives can heal. I have been thinking about that sentence for 4 months. I would like to stay Della, if you will have me. You are family Marlin. This hearth is yours too. He put the cornbread down. He put his hands over his face. He cried. I was 45 years old. He was a grown man, and he cried like a boy who had been lost for a long time, and who had finally found his way home. Della did not look away. She let him cry, because that was what her grandmother had taught her. You do not look away. You just keep the fire burning. The supper was on the last Saturday in October. Mrs. Coleman put the word out at the feed store, Mr. Pendleton at the clerk's office. Tobias told everyone he knew. 83 people came. They brought dishes. They brought chairs. They brought bottles of cider and jars of preserves. Della cooked. She banked coals. She ran the crane. She turned a whole chicken on the spitjack for the first time in 114 years. The brass gears sang. Tobias had built 4 long oak tables. They ran the length of the common room. Out onto the porch, into the yard, Mrs. Coleman lit candles, dozens of them. Marlin Ashford served the beans. He wore a clean shirt Della had given him. He looked 10 years younger than he had 2 weeks before. Adelaide Whitmore came. Elwood Pendleton drove her. She sat at the head of the first table. Della had insisted. The food went out. The plates came back empty. The wooden bowl filled. At the end of the supper, Della stood at the hearth. I am not good at making speeches, so I am not going to make one. But I want to say thank you, because none of you had to help me, and you all did. This hearth was cold for 114 years. It is not cold anymore. It is not cold because of you. The room clapped. Della sat down. Tobias sat beside her. He put his hand over hers on the table. She did not pull hers away. Later, after the guests had gone home, after only Mrs. Coleman and Adelaide Whitmore and Marlin and Tobias remained, Mrs. Coleman came up to Della. She was holding an envelope, yellowed, corners soft. Honey, I have been carrying this in my purse for 15 years. Your grandmother gave it to me at Christmas of 2010, she said. Hattie, someday my Della will do something that fills this hearth, and when she does, you give her this envelope. You did it, honey, and now this is yours. Della sat down on the hearthstone. She opened the envelope. Inside, a single photograph, black and white, faded, curling at the corners. A young woman, 19 years old, standing on the front porch of the Ashford Inn, a plain cotton dress, a canvas rucksack over her shoulder, dark hair pulled back in a single braid. She had Della's face. Della turned the photograph over. On the back, in her grandmother's handwriting, Mabel Ashford, 19 years old. March 1962, I walked here from Staunton. I had $25 in my pocket and a cast iron Dutch oven in my bag and a key my mother had given me. I stood on this porch for 3 hours. I was too afraid to go in. I walked back to Staunton. I married your grandfather. I raised your mother. I ran a boarding house for 30 years. I had a good life. Do not misunderstand me, but every day of my life, I wished I had turned the key, my Della. You turned the key. You did what I could not. You have finished my story, Grandma Mabel. Della held the photograph. She looked at her grandmother's face at 19. The same age Della was now, standing on the same porch, holding the same kind of Dutch oven, wearing the same kind of afraid. Della closed her eyes. She had not cried since her grandmother's funeral. She cried now, not for long, not loud, just enough for her grandmother at 19, for her grandmother at 80, for everyone in the room who had helped her keep the promise a woman 178 years ago had made. Mrs. Coleman put her hand on Della's shoulder. Adelaide Whitmore put her hand on Della's other shoulder. Marlin stood behind her. Tobias sat beside her. Nobody spoke. The fire crackled in the hearth. The candles burned low. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. After a while, Della wiped her eyes. She stood up. She walked to the mantel. She set the photograph of her grandmother beside the guest ledger. She picked up a pen. She turned to the next page, the first blank page, the page that had been waiting for 114 years. She wrote, October 25th, 2025, reopen. Della Ashford, innkeeper. Feed whoever comes. She set the pen down. She looked at the hearth. The fire burned steady, red and orange coals, perfect for the morning. She would bank them before she went to bed. She would wake up before dawn. She would open the door, and whoever came through it, she would feed. Because that was the promise a hearth makes. Not that it will always be warm, but that it will always be lit for the next traveler who comes to the door. Della Ashford was 19 years old. She had spent $25 on an abandoned stagecoach inn on the Old Valley Turnpike in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. It was the best $25 anyone in her family had ever spent. And on a clear October night, in her 20th year, on a porch her great-great-great-grandfather had built in 1847, she understood finally what her grandmother had been teaching her all along. A hearth is not a fireplace. A hearth is a promise. And a promise like that will wait as long as it has to for the person who is ready to keep it.